Okay, so I'll go first. This is on page 65, and it's at the top of page 65. And it's two quotes, but the other one's on the back page, so I'll read this one first. And they said that it is a much more efficient use of teacher time to develop a handful of academically rigorous question stems to use during a lesson as opposed to spending time creating an entire bank of new, more rigorous or relevant lessons. And I took that and connected it to what it said on the previous page, on page 63, when they were talking about seed questions, and it's the second paragraph down the bottom where it says second consider. And the sentence is, through the use of the seed question provided to the small groups, the teacher can increase the level of rigor at will.
Okay, so we all are going to think about the quote, and then we each have a minute to respond.
And then I'll finish off the discussion for the quote, and then Mavis will go next. You can respond whenever you want.
Oh, okay.
And you have 1 minute.
Well, I think that this kind of goes along with just stuff that we've kind of already been talking about with the rigor and relevance. You know, on page 63 when it says, it does not matter at what level of rigor overall instruction is delivered through the use of the seed question provided to the small groups, the teacher can increase the level of rigor at will. I mean, I think that that's a very good, you know, way to sort of incorporate some of the struggles that we've been having, particularly with the essay writing, you know, to be able to create those seed questions for different levels of students, you know, depending on, which I think maybe I mentioned that.
Time.
That was it?
I had
Minute.
10 seconds.
Oh, that was a short minute. Okay, go.
Along with what she said, I use stems and seeds a lot in ESL, and I find that links to a lot of what I'm teaching in my own level English class, because sometimes when we, to sound cliche, plant that seed or you know, give them that sentence stem, it gives them that starting point that they need, and a lot of times they can start with that and then run and take off with it and then come back to it later on if it needs to be changed, and really builds on that rigor.
Okay.
And I was thinking about, I know we've had discussions about how much of our classroom, especially in regular, ends up being focused on the very lowest level skills. We spend a lot of time in kind of building super simple fundamentals. Our students claim that they don't remember anything, so we're always having to start at the beginning, even if it's something we taught 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So again, these seed questions, I think, you know, I think it will be a good way to be able to do both in the same class.
So the reason that this stuck out to me, I'm totally not going to use my full 3 minutes. The reason that this stuck out to me was because of what we've talked about all year of, you know, time and the best use of time. What can we get the most bang for our buck in just our, you know, 55 minutes that we have with our kids, and be able to come into a lesson, you know, with a really good lesson, but how do I spend that time? And I really like the idea of spending a couple of minutes, you know, at the end of the day, prepping for the next day of, okay, what are the questions that we're going to be asking for tomorrow? What do I really want them focusing on? Because giving them those questions, I think, will help the question stems will really help those kids who have a rough time focusing on what is important and what isn't, because they don't have those filters. It will help them focus on, oh, this is the important part I'm supposed to pay attention to, and they can start building those filters. They can start building those filters in, and it's going to help keep me focused. And then the seed questions, I think, do go along with the question stems, because if you have those seed questions, I see that you create the stems based on whatever the seed is. And so raising the level of rigor, is one positive aspect of it, but also being able to help those kids who don't have that filter of, this is what's important, I need to focus on this. This isn't quite as important, I need to spend my focus on the important parts. And I think the stems and the questions will help them a lot. And it's not time consuming. I think it will be a huge reward for a low level of time spent. And we could do this in our planning meeting, our long-term planning meeting, coming up with some stems and seed questions for the pieces that we're reading and the tasks that we're doing. And I think we could use these really well.
Okay. Well, mine's kind of it's not really a sentence. It's kind of a few sentences. So I'm just going to say, it's page 22 at the bottom. And it says, one cannot be educated and yet unable to communicate one's ideas in written form. But in the field, one observes two seemingly paradoxical facts. The first is that critical writing is a meaningful part of learning. For students, critical writing creates meaning, solidifies connections, transforms subconscious ideas into conscious thoughts, and is essential for authentic literacy. And then kind of down, what really startled me is the quote towards the end of that paragraph when it said that this included, whenever they went to go find that in classrooms, it said this included thousands of observations in reading, writing, and secondary level English language arts classrooms where one would expect to observe a significant number of students writing critically, but they did not observe that.
I can start. Do you want me to start?
Okay.
I've read Schmoker's book that he references in here, Results Now, and Schmoker talks a big portion about writing critically and how he observed what he called the Crayola classroom, which was art in English classrooms instead of writing critically. And I remember that vividly, because I felt like that's what I did earlier in my years, is instead of having to write, having them do something artsy. And I think that it's sad that they're not writing critically, and seeing it happen not happening in English classrooms is scary. And I think that's something that we need to work on, just to make sure that we are writing critically every single day.
Oh, is it me?
Sure.
All right. I was also startled by the less than 10% observation. But I was thinking specifically about this year. Other years I've always had like a warm-up journal, and we've done writing at the beginning of class every day. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, that was always a major grade. And I felt like last year, when that was taken away from being able to be a major grade, I stopped emphasizing it, and I've realized I haven't done it this year. We still do some writing, but it's not kind of systemic the way that it has been, and this has kind of reminded me maybe I need to, think next semester. And I like this idea, I've been in other places in the book where it talks about putting that kind of in the middle of class, so that you frame, then you teach a little bit, and then that journal portion in the middle.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I would like to maybe go back to that practice, just moving where it is.
Yep.
And along with that, with as much writing as we incorporate, I find that it's easiest to drop that warm-up writing portion if I feel like a lesson is going to take too long, because I want to have a warm-up writing activity, and then class will get started, kids will come in late, I'll have to check roll, and I'm like, okay, we'll skip this just so we can get to the lesson. And I feel like it's so much easier for us, or for me, I'm not going to say for us, but for me to say, oh, we'll get to that later when it comes to writing, and I should be doing it more. And so, I mean, as surprised as I am, I'm kind of not surprised at the same time, because I find it so easy to just kind of put those small writing assignments to the side because I need to focus on an essay or an OER.
Right.
Or, you know, reading something in class.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo everybody's sentiments. Just basically everything that everybody said. I was kind of shocked to see that. And, you know, it's interesting because, but then again, I'm not shocked because, you know, we've had, you know, at least I've had students tell me that they didn't write at all last year. You know, we've kind of heard some of that, you know, trickle down from other high schools and, you know, say that, you know, some of the, there's not a lot of writing going on at the middle school level is kind of some of the feedback that we've heard. And so then it kind of becomes sort of a burden, you know, for us to basically start from scratch of teaching them not only to write some of the basic things, but to put it in a place that it's critical, you know, and because some of them can't even write you know, like a basic paragraph or a basic, you know, so to even throw in the critical aspect of it is just over the top for some. So I think what's interesting though is incorporating the sentence, seed, stem, you know, would potentially help with that.
I think so.
So, yeah.
Gotta blow it up.
I forgot to blow it up. What was I thinking?
Try one more time.
There we go. So, so mine comes from, it's going to be page 15. It's the first sentence under the weakness of current practice. One of the great disadvantages of current common instructional practice is that in the mind of the teacher. They actually reinforce the belief that poor performance is the fault of the student and the root of excellent performance is the teacher. After all, as the teacher, one has either presented the material with passion and creativity or dumbed the lesson down to the lowest classroom denominator.
Ouch.
Whenever y'all are ready.
I have thought about this particular sentence since you said it in our department meeting, and I have tried to have some coming to the universe moments about whether I think that or not. And I think I would like to think that I don't, but I absolutely do, because my kids who don't get it, if it's one or two, I usually do put the blame on them. You weren't paying attention to class. You didn't do the work. You didn't practice. And I still don't think that's a bad thing. I still don't think I'm wrong. I think that overall, if I have a majority of kids who aren't getting it, I'm usually pretty good about realizing, okay, I did something wrong, or I didn't explain this well, or we just need to spend some more time on this, do some other activities, and we do that. But when it's a handful, 1, 2, 3, who have been sleeping in class, who have not been doing any of their work, who have been the funny guys, you know, trying to do everything but their work, and they're the ones that are not being successful, yes, I do still put it's on them. And I don't think that that's a problem.
And I look at the part, you know, where it says, after all, as the teacher, one has either presented the material with passion and creativity or dumbed the lesson down to the lowest common denominator. I mean, I would kind of agree with Shannon when you have 1 or 2 students that are not, you know, they're choosing not to engage in the lesson, and you're trying to grab them and you're calling on them and, you know, doing all of those things to try to get them involved, and they just won't. You know, some of them have legitimate other things going on, you know, things in their personal life, things at home that are preventing them from learning, and I don't necessarily feel like that's my fault. It's a challenge for me that I'm supposed to be, you know, still trying to grab and engage them, but I'm not convinced that 100% of the time I can get 100% of students. But if it's more than just a couple, then I do tend to think, you know, it's me, I've done something, I haven't explained it well, I haven't, you know. But I do think, you know, we can come to them 80%, but they've got to come to us, they're 20, or the whole classroom thing doesn't work. So I, you know, when I look at this under the category of the weakness of current practice, I don't know.
I guess you know, I mean, I think that there is truth to that. I mean, I think that, you know, I agree in some respects that, I mean, you're going to have those kids that are just act silly and, you know, it doesn't matter what they do, you know, or what you do, they're always going to find a way to act silly. And sadly, I have a lot of those kids and spread out throughout my classes. But I also, you know, and I guess maybe I'm different in the sense that I do sort of take that responsibility on, you know, when I feel like that maybe there's something wrong at home, or maybe there's something happening, you know, that is affecting, you know, what they're doing in class. And I guess maybe, and I don't know, maybe that comes from, you know, the special ed background that I have in terms of wanting to differentiate that instruction, and do different things in class that's going to reach the different levels that there are. And so, you know, I guess I don't necessarily feel like it's dumbing it down as much as I feel like it's providing that more cooperative learning experience where it hits every level. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, the reason I chose that quote and is the same reason that I mentioned it at our meeting, our departmental meeting, is because it just, I mean, it was really profound to me that when a student does really, really well, that's my student, that's my work, and then if a student fails, well, he or she was sleeping in class or they didn't pay attention in class. Mm-hmm. And in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to be that super awesome, Dangerous Minds, freedom writer, stand and deliver teacher who makes a huge difference in the world.
I'm so sorry.
You know?
I'm going to call you Michelle Pfeiffer.
And so for me, it's like I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm like, the success of the student is based on the student and their level of achievement. It's not my work. I just give them the information and they run with it. And so for me, for them to say that, I was offended.
Yeah, if they don't get it or...
Yeah, and then yesterday, and this is why it stood out to me again today, yesterday in class I told my kids, okay, this is how you're going to take your Romeo and Juliet test. When you're done, I'm going to give you your lined paper so that you can write your essay. Why do we have to do all this? What is happening? I said, last week I told you how all of this was going to be laid out. I put it on a PowerPoint. And I told you Thursday, I told you Friday, I told you yesterday. And another student spoke up and said, you sure did. And that student sat back and he said, maybe I should listen better. And so that's another reason that I've brought that up, because the success or failure of a student to me is that of the student. We give them all that we possibly can. What they do with it is how their success or failure will come to be. And
you got an applause for your idea.
we got a standing ovation. We got a standing ovation for that one.
All right. So we are on page 26. So in the 6 years that I've been here, I think we've done 4 or 5 different, here's what's required to be on your board. Here's what's required to be up. Everywhere from, it must be the exact wording of the state standard,
Have fun
to-
wherever you're going.
it must be in student-friendly language. And then last year, you know, it's our current thing where it's gotta be the 2-parter. It's gotta be the, you know, I can do this and here's how. And what I like about the way they frame it, I like the we will, I will construction. I like the student-friendly language. I like that it has the 2 parts, the we will, the I will, because even the current ones that we've been writing this year, the learning targets, and you know, I've been faithfully putting mine up every day and we talk about it, but even some of those, you know, I feel like they just get too lengthy for freshmen. A nice short we will statement. So anyway, so do I need to, I suppose I need to read the part.
Probably need to read the quote.
It's Rainer in.
Okay, you gotta-
Rainer in. Read your quote.
Here it is. What distinguishes a lesson frame, we're in the top of 26. What distinguishes a lesson frame objective from objectives as they are typically written is that the lesson frame objective is written in concrete, student-friendly language and is presented in the form of we will. And then down here at the bottom, the closing question, product, or task is generally presented as an I will statement. Okay, now I'll be quiet. I've already done my 500 minutes. Go ahead.
Exaggerate much?
Hyperbole. I was about to say hyperbole much.
I laughed out loud reading this chapter, thinking about how much stress it was with the learning targets, and then this seems so much easier
Yes.
than the learning targets and how to write them. Well, essentially they're the exact same thing. This is what we are doing today. This is the skill that you are, you know, that you need to be learning, and this is how you're going to do it. It really should not matter if you write it in a we will, I will, or the student will. As long as the student comes into your classroom and knows, this is what I'm doing today, this is what I need to be focused on, and this is how I'm going to show to myself and to anybody else in here that I know what I'm doing, then it should be fine. End story.
Yeah.
So yes, I laughed out loud, but I like this way better. I will be using this. This makes sense to me. Finally.
Well, I guess one of the things that I've noticed is that when it says we will identify the components of an effective lesson frame, I guess obviously the biggest difference between this way and the way that we've been asked to do it is there's no in this method that you will be doing it. And I think this is simpler for a freshman. I agree with the point that, you know, because I mean, I feel like, and yeah, even though I'm an English teacher, I mean, I can write these learning targets in a way that sounds pretty and, you know, hits the person that may walk in my door, you know, to see if my learning target is there. And I can make it sound fluffy and pretty, but is it going to matter to the student? And sometimes I think, and I'm guilty of that, sometimes I think that the learning target I create is geared more towards who may walk in my room versus the actual student that's supposed to be reading it and seeing it. Does that make sense?
Yes. For me, I struggled with the learning targets, and you know, I would always ask y'all, you know, what are your learning targets for the day? And I would try to use big words like synthesize and get out my Bloom's taxonomy chart and see
color coded.
my color
Bloom's
coded.
taxonomy chart.
I found one recently that has owls in a tree, and I was like, this is way cuter. I can use this. And so I'm sitting there trying to, you know, make sure that I'm, you know, that rigor is there, and then they give
The
us
owls
this.
bring the rigor.
And I was like, this is so much easier. It's exactly the same. Why is it so much easier? I don't know why it's so much easier, but I love the fact that my students can come in, and I started doing this as soon as they presented it too, was they can come in, they can say, okay, this is what Hammy's going to give to us today, and this is what she expects me to do. and they're able to make that connection. They know what class is going to be about. They know what the expectation is for that day. And for some reason that I haven't even had to look at Bloom's to make sure that it's reaching that, because I mean, it is that scaffolding. You know, we have to start here and then we have to build, you know. So I found that this approach was a lot easier than learning targets, but I also came in like at the tail end of learning targets too last year. So that's another part of the confusion that I had. And then I feel that it has to be on my board, and this makes it so much easier for me and the kiddos, and it keeps us focused as well.
And I just feel like, you know, English, our objectives are so general and broad that this brings it down to the concrete. You know, it does answer the student question, what are we going to do today? So I like that part about it. And I think I've used my 3 minutes in the first part.
3 million.
So the last two parts of this is optional open dialogue about the text and ideas and questions raised during the first part of the protocol, and the last part is debrief. So is there any other open dialogue just about what we've talked about that you guys want to bring to the table? Because I have an idea, but I can close it out with it's really more in the debrief. So anything else that we want to talk about? No.
I don't think so. I think we pretty much addressed everything.
Okay. Here's what I was thinking. Can I have your pencil fast? Thank you.
Your germs on it.
Look at, isn't it pretty? Pretty pencil. Okay. So we're getting ready to have our long-term planning meeting, and I'm wondering what can we bring from this discussion and from what we've read and what we've talked about today and kind of the epiphanies that we've had. What can we take from this for our long-term planning meeting to help us get back to where we were the second 6 weeks when things were, you know, we were able to work as a team and really make sure that we were pushing our kids, because I feel like my kids did better the second 6 weeks. I was better the second 6 weeks because we were better the second 6 weeks. So what can we take from here to get us going?
Is that the bell?
With a minute 30 before the kids go crazy. What can we take?
Well, from the things that we discussed,
My first idea was to develop seed questions.
yeah, well, develop, definitely.
And I would also say, as we're going through and saying, here's what we're going to do this day, this day, this day, this day, to figure out what that critical writing piece is going to be with those seed questions, and figuring out really quickly the we will, I will.
Yeah, the we will, I will would definitely help us have focus from day to day, and then deciding what the critical writing would help us with what we talked about in reference to the lack of.
Well, and I think that, I mean, honestly, I think these expository writings are critical in some capacity.
Yeah, they
I
are.
mean,
They are.
When you're having to, you know, take come up with different examples to share in an expository essay, I mean, that's critical writing.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
So I think if we're able to come up with those seed questions, develop the critical questions for the day, come up with our we will, I will for each day, make sure that, you know, they're flowing in. I think that's going to help us really stay focused and make sure that we are covering everything that we need to. So that needs to be, I think, our first priority when we meet. Anything else before we close out? Y'all are awesome. Buys all around.
That needs to go in the
Can you press the red button? Bye, guys.
Asta,
holla.
holla at your boy.